Last Sunday, we had our service at Sybil's cabin, outside. It was beautiful, of course. It's why I'm still wearing shorts. I'm optimistic that I can bring that weather back. It's funny, isn't it, how this summer we had two services outside. One at Mary and Gary's farm in July, and one at Sybil's cabin in August. And on both of those occasions, despite the fact that it rained the day before, it was beautiful on the day. And we were still able to be outside in a summer that frankly didn't start until the 15th of August and has rained most days, right? It's a miracle. It's beautiful. In fact, it inspires me. You know, on Sunday, I'm going to come back to this, but it reminded me of something really important, which actually is kind of the point today. But just as an aside, I was kind of thinking that really what we ought to do is we ought to get rid of our buildings and just have a nice garden. Just have a really lovely garden, which would work awesome if we lived in, like, Mexico. But obviously isn't good for... We could build a big greenhouse. We could have our own crystal cathedral. It'd be awesome, wouldn't it? And then we'd be surrounded by the beauty of the wonder of God's nature all the time, or construction, whichever, all the time. Yeah, it'd be beautiful. Because it was awesome. Can I just say, though, here's the thing that it reminded me of. Last Sunday, this is why I mention it, is because when Lori and Liz and I arrived at Sybil's, Graham, God bless him, had already set up a microphone and sound system, and the keyboard was over here on the right, as it always is. And you all set up your chairs like 3 miles away over by the trees. I had to move the microphone. Now I know, some of you said, it's because you were in the shade. It was cold in the shade. That's not a good reason. You should have sat in the sun. And you shouldn't have been so far away. I saw you like shivering there in the shade. And by the way, you didn't have the best view. I did, because I was looking at you, of course, that's what I mean. I was looking at the water and the trees, and it was beautiful, and it was lovely. The sun was shining. It was really nice. You all were staring at your cars. Here's what it reminded me of. Why is it? And this has been ongoing forever. Well, actually, if you go back to the 5th century, no. But in more recent centuries, nobody wants to sit at the front. They don't, really. I mean, I appreciate you guys sitting at the front. I do. I'm guessing it's more likely because it's floor level, right? And in Bashaw, Lori always sits at the front, and quite often the Wilsons or Jackie will sit at the front, in the front row. Why? Because no one else sits there, I'm pretty sure. Because nobody wants to sit at the front. Why? Are you afraid of me? Are you afraid I might come out there and drag you up the front and put you on show? Are you afraid? Because people are looking at you, right? Is that it? If you sit at the front, if you fall asleep, people can see. FYI, it doesn't matter where you sit. If you fall asleep, I see you. But people don't like to sit at the front, generally speaking. And I can tell you, actually, for myself, I do not like to sit at the front. And that's not just a church thing. That's a anything thing, particularly a theater thing. I do not like to sit at the front. I'll tell you why. First of all, people can see me, and I'll probably fall asleep. But also because whoever's on stage, there's always a chance they're going to drag me up there, right? Have you ever been to one of those shows where there's audience participation? They're going after the people who sit near the front. So where do most people sit? Unless they want to participate, they'll sit at the back or in the middle, right? Because they can't get to you if you're in the middle. You don't want to be on the ends at the front. You don't want to be seen. You don't want to participate. You want to be where you're comfortable. And if you're me, that's at the back. I like to be at the back. If I nod off, no one can bother me. No one can see me. I won't have to participate. That's why I like to sit at the back. I always feel badly for the Queen, by the way. I know this sounds random, but think about it. Anytime you've ever seen a service broadcast from Westminster Abbey or one of the big cathedrals, when the Queen's there, where does she sit? At the front, right where you guys are. She sits at the front. And I see that, and I see her sitting there holding her handbag, and I think, I bet she's thinking, just once I'd like to sit at the back. Because what if I nod off? What if I have to participate? Why am I here? And I'll tell you why she's there. Where's the most important seat in the house? Here's a hint. It's the one you don't want. It's at the front. That's why she sits at the front. Priority seating. That's why she gets to sit at the front. If you go to any of those fancy theaters in England, or even fancy theaters in the States, this didn't work out well for Abraham Lincoln, but usually the important person sits right at the front, in a booth at the side. That's the worst seat in the house. Not just for Lincoln, but it's the worst seat in the house because you have the worst, this is your sight line. The best seat would be if it were right in the middle, like halfway up. But why is that person there? It's because they're important. These are the important seats for the important people. Don't everybody all rush to the front now. Because I watched a little bit of that service on the Sunday when Alan Richards was here, and he tried to get you all to come and sit at the front. And you weren't too keen, were you? Why? Well, because he pointed it out, and it put you on the spot. You had to get up and move. People are watching, right? It's not comfortable. You're comfortable where you are now. Probably. And if you're not, now that I've talked about it, you're probably going to move next week. So I had this idea a while back, which I thought was a great idea until I shared it with people, and they said it wasn't. But I thought it was a great idea, and it would solve the whole dilemma of why no one sits in the front. And by the way, bonus for the people who are currently sitting in the front. And that is, we'd replace all of these seats with a row of lazy boys. And not the cheap ones either. I mean the big fancy ones that have the massagers and a little fridge in the side and the big cushiony thing at the back for your head. We have like a whole row of them right here. And here's the best part, I think. I thought this was the best idea. You get to sit in those based on how much you put in the offering that day. So it's a fundraiser too, right? Because who wouldn't want to sit in a lazy boy? Then, I don't know, some socialist pointed out to me that we should have a rotation so that everybody gets to sit at the front. But I thought that was a great idea. Apparently it's not. But the other thing that occurred to me too, though, was, but hang on a second. This is a seat this is a priority seat. The important people sit here, right? But what if the important people think like the Queen? Just once I'd like to sit at the back. So then I thought, we put the lazy boys at the back. And then it depends on how much you put in the offering that day, and you get to sit at the back in a lazy boy. You could nod off and no one would see, except me. A little bit dilemma there then, isn't it? So do we go with what we determine to be the priority seating, or do we go with where you're going to be, where you, the person who's going to sit there, is going to be most comfortable? How do we decide? It's a little bit of a dilemma. Is it because you're important or because you're comfortable? So here's a problem with that. It doesn't matter where you sit. It doesn't matter where you sit, because the reason you're here probably isn't because you think you're important or because we have the most comfortable seats in town. By the way, in Bashaw, they do. Those are the most comfortable pews in town. These might well be the most comfortable chairs in a church in town. I don't know. I haven't been in the other churches. Although I'm betting some of them have really hard wooden pews. Either way, it's not why you're sitting there, is it? It's not why you're here. Why are you here? Now, hang on a second with that thought. Because as I ask that question, you may well be asking yourself, at this point, I'm wondering why I am here, Robin. Because you haven't said anything wise yet. Maybe slightly entertaining, but not any wisdom. But here's the wisdom of the story about who gets to sit where at the table. This isn't my table. It's not your table. It's not the table of the United Church of Canada. It's the table of Jesus, and everyone gets to sit at the table of Jesus. And when you sit at the table of Jesus, and you are looking for an engagement with God, when you are seeking God and hoping to feel the Spirit, everyone has the most important seat. Everyone. Because when you are having an experience of God, when you come to meet God, you're like the only person in the room, and you might as well be sitting on a throne, because that's how God is with you. I'm pretty confident about that, even if you have to answer the phone. This isn't ours, it's God's. And if you are here to have an encounter with God, if you are here to learn about how we live like Jesus, if you are here because you're seeking something, the refreshment of the Spirit, a moment of revelation, a moment of comfort, whatever it is that you're here, you are the most important person in the house, even if you have my back. Sorry. You are, because this is a table of Jesus, and everyone is equally welcome there. Back in the day, I mentioned earlier, maybe not since I think I said 5th century, but even earlier than the 5th century, the way church used to work in people's houses, and then they started to have places where they gathered, was they had a table in the middle of the room and no chairs. By the way, services could be 3 hours long. Because everyone wanted to be around the table, because that's where we gather.